I wanted to talk a little bit about free thought and God. Yesterday, I just happened to mention in passing that I am a free thinker. And then I got a lot of comments or questions about what a free thinker is. And I can only talk about what a free thinker is from my estimation. I'm a non believer and a free thinker, and I'm an atheist. That means, of course, that I would define myself as not believing in any sort of a God. Now, some of the people I admire don't take my position, and the person pictured here, Spinoza, didn't adopt my position. He did believe in a kind of a deity, and yet he saw that deity in a very special way. I don't agree with Spinoza, and I've never truly understood exactly why he had to invoke the concept of a God. Now, this is Spinoza's God, and I know all of you probably know this, is not a God in the sense of the Judeo Christian get in there, manipulate a father deity, that kind of thing. He didn't believe in any of that, and I would call that the kind of Judeo Christian belief in a God as basically nonsense to me. It's nonsense and it's done a lot of damage. Um, but Spinoza did believe in a non interventionist in human affairs kind of a God. And, it's the same kind of thing that a lot of scientists say they will, that they accept. And I'm kind of always surprised because I really don't see personally the need for that. Now, can I prove there is no God? No, no one can prove a negative. There is no way to prove that there is no God. So I wouldn't even get into a discussion about trying to prove there is no God. What I really think is interesting, though, is that a lot of functioning, serious scientists don't agree with me. And I find that a little weird. I always have. There'll be a link in this video to some of my questions that I had for Professor Anton, because he shares a kind of view of an impersonal God, or at least he seems to, from what I've gleaned from watching his videos. I want to talk, though, because I was reading the very current issue of New Scientist. It is the 14th of April issue, and there is a really interesting article from Christoph Koch on consciousness. I've always been interested in consciousness. In fact, the reason I do YouTube videos and did them initially is just to talk to people about consciousness. And Christoph Koch is a very interesting scientist studying consciousness. He's just been given a giant grant to study it, and that I think is going to be pretty interesting. He's also written a book um, that is linked in the low bar. I can't get it yet here in the United Kingdom, but I will get it as soon as I can, about his views on reductionism. And he is a reductionist, and yet, if you read the article, he takes some pretty interesting ideas about what reductionism actually is. Some of the research that he's doing into consciousness I found a little bit disconcerting, but I'm not going to discuss that now because I want to discuss his view of God, because I think he summarized pretty clearly what this view is. I do not, as I said, you always have to say this about 3 times if you're trying to discuss something that's not extremely simple, because videos don't give themselves to discussing complex ideas, in my opinion. But he is taking a view very similar to Spinoza's, and yet it's even, I think, a little bit. I don't think that Spinoza would recognize this completely. Here's what he says in the New Scientist article. It's called "Crystal Clear on Consciousness," and it's in the opinion section. The big idea. on page 24 if you have a copy, but I'm just going to read a couple of things from it. Throughout my quest to understand consciousness, Christoph Koch says, I never lost my sense of living in a magical universe. I do believe some deep and elemental organizing principle created the universe and set it in motion for a purpose. Now, I really don't agree with him, but it's interesting that he is a very respected scientist and he takes this attitude, which to me is very strange. He works with Francis Crick, who was one of the discoverers of DNA, of course. And he's very well known. He's at MIT. If you're interested in pursuing this further, you'll see some links for Christoph Koch in the low bar. He goes on to say, I grew up calling this God, in other words, this organizing principle, he called God with a small g, but a God much closer to Baruch de Spinoza's God than the God of Michelangelo's paintings. A pioneering generation of stars had to die in spectacular supernova to seed space with heavier elements needed for the rise of self-replicating bags of chemicals on a rocky planet orbiting a young star at just the right distance. The competitive pressures of natural selection made possible the ascension of creatures with nervous systems. As the complexity of these systems grew in staggering proportions, some of the creatures evolved the ability to reflect on themselves, to contemplate their beautiful but cruel world. While the rise of sentient life was inevitable, it does not mean Earth had to bear life, or that bipedal, big-brained primates had to walk the African grasslands, but I do believe the laws of physics overwhelmingly favored the emergence of consciousness, and that those laws will lead us to a more or less complete knowledge of it. So those are his views, and I don't, as I said, I can find views interesting that I don't absolutely agree with, and I certainly don't agree that we need to invoke God in understanding the universe. I don't think we do need to. Some people feel the need to do that, and I've never quite understood it, but I've certainly read a lot about it, and I've tried to understand it. And as I said, as soon as I can, I'll be getting Christoph Koch's book, which isn't published yet in the UK. I don't think, and I get tired of saying this, but I don't think anybody should have to apologize for reading books. I just don't. It helps you to get a grasp on complex things, and no one should have to apologize for that. If you choose not to read books and get your opinions other ways, that's your choice. I think it leads to something that lacks depth, but it's just my opinion, okay? So, what I'm basically saying is you can snap to all the opinions you want to, and you can consider them the absolute truth as much as you like, but there is a big world out there, and a lot of people are doing a lot of hard thinking. And it's just interesting to me to listen to the people doing the hard thinking before I try to snap judgment what the world really is. Anyway, you guys take care.